we're headed today. Okay, it really is a bonus day looking at all those particulars. All right, let's look at testing. Okay, what's your guys' understanding of testing? Let's look at testing at the end, and then we'll look at how do we do testing between, because that's quite a cool little thing as well. What's our idea behind testing? Why do we do it? What's its purpose?
So the client doesn't go back to thinking what their problem was.
That's right. Anything else?
To test the resiliency of the resources.
To test the resiliency, to test the client back to where they started. So looping it back. What else?
Testing reveals a lot of knots.
Definitely does. Has anyone found that yet? Isn't that cool? That's what I love about testing. You test it and it could be on your last testing question and there's not shows up. You should be very thankful that it showed up, because that would have been a second, third, fourth, fifth. It would have been that phone call may have, hey, this didn't work. That's why testing is so powerful. Okay. Anything else, guys? What's the value of testing?
You're looking to break the session.
Definitely looking to break the session. Okay. What would be the bonus of just keeping a client a little bit longer in your office, aside from what we talked about already? What would be the value of that?
It allows them to continue the process.
Allow that processing to start. Okay, so the doors are open. You're just keeping them there in your office in front of you. Okay.
Yeah, and testing the connections too.
Exactly. Connects to all those resources, tries on the suit. Okay. But I understand where a lot of people get caught with the testing at the ends. We'll look at testing in the middle soon, is the content or the context, really. Okay. What's the difference between stop smoking testing? What's the difference between anxiety testing? What's the difference between weight loss testing? Now, while the theory remains the same, all that's going to change is just the frame. Okay. So if you look at the masterclass that we had in the Kajabi platform, I gave you guys a set of questions that I used, the testing masterclass that I would use for, I think I did for smoking. But let's change the context so it makes sense. Like, okay, they're pretty much the same questions. Okay. What do you guys want to test? And we'll do this just as a role play. Do you want to test anxiety, weight loss?
Anxiety.
Anxiety. Who says anxiety? Who would want to do that? Okay. Yeah, because anxiety is very common. Okay. So, yep, perfect. Okay. So I'm going to say Justin is my client. Okay. I'm working with Justin. I get to the end. All the knots have been broken. He's looking at me like, wow, this is incredible. Time to test. Okay. And again, write these down if you want, guys. Let's look at emotional testing first. Being that anxiety is a very emotional thing, it will have its location bound as well. What could some questions be around the emotions of anxiety? Any ideas? Just throw them out there.
Panicky feeling, is that what you mean? Panicky
feeling, yep. So what could the symptoms be? Because we can include that in the testing.
They get shaky, you know.
Shaky. Yep. Anything else?
Yeah.
Nervous. Fear, nervous. Yep. What else?
Sweaty hands.
Sweaty hands. Yep. And remember,
racing mind.
Yep. Your client's going to give you things anyway. Racing heart from Ginny, for Ginny. Yep.
Overthinking.
Overthinking. Okay. Yeah. So a lot gets tied into the anxiety thing. Okay. So what type of question could we frame as an anxiety testing for the emotion? Well, let's say, for example, I said to a client, if we're going back to the smoking thing, we can just break the context. I say to a client, do you think you'll smoke if you get stressed out? So it's a very emotional thing. It's not location bound. It's a very emotional thing. How can we change that frame to anxiety? Any ideas?
How does your body feel when you're, no?
Yep, keep going. You could say something like, do you think you'll feel that anxiety or that racing heart that you told me about if you're feeling a little bit stressed? Do you see it's the same question? We just changed the context. Okay. Do you think you'll have anxiety when you start worrying about your money problems? How do you feel about that now?
Do you think you'll have anxiety when you deal with your crazy boss, whatever?
There you go. So that could be a bit of emotional, but also location as well. Same thing I'd ask a smoker. Do you think you'll smoke when you're driving on the way home down the highway for 45 minutes? Okay, and remember, your client will tell you all of this information anyway. To change that to anxiety, do you think you have that anxiety while driving the car down the highway for 45 minutes? How do you feel about that now? Can you see the question is the exact same? We're just taking out smoking and inputting anxiety. Okay, does that make sense, guys? Yep.
So I was thinking, you know, I know for me, one of the questions that kind of I'm curious about is when are they triggered, right? When you're talking it in the hypnotic, when are they triggered? What situations they triggered? So would that be good then to use those triggers back in the testing?
Exactly what you want to use. And those triggers should come up on the strategy call. So let's say, Q, you're my client, you're my potential client. I'm going through the strategy call script and say, hey, when do you notice the anxiety the most? Well, I notice it when my boss yells at me. Aha, that's testing for later. I know that when my kids are screaming and being little assholes. Aha, that's testing for later. I know it when I've got a full stomach of dessert. I know I shouldn't have eaten all that chocolate. I start feeling anxiety then. Aha, that's testing for later. Okay. That's when you want to remember those things. But as part of the hypnotic interview as well, that's a good question. Like, when do you notice it the most? Give me a frame, give me a context. And those things should be recalled later to say, hey, I remember you said that you got anxiety when the sky was blue. You remember you told me that on the strategy call. How do you feel about that now? Loop it back.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Excellent. Okay, so let's keep going with let's do a weight loss example. Okay. What could be some emotional testing for weight loss? Now, weight loss is a little bit tricky because you've really got to make sure that you frame the weight loss sessions right. I remember I had a client, I talked about this last time. And I think I asked the question, how do you know this will work for you? And she said, well, I want to jump on the scales after the session to see if I've lost weight. All right, this is not going to be a fun session, because some clients will believe that. Really realize with weight loss, the frame is, I'm going to help you unblock all the stuff that prevents you from going to the gym, eating the right food, being mindful, all the stuff you have to do logically. My job is to unblock all that shit beforehand. We're not going to magically lose 20 kilos after the session. If we did, I could probably charge you $100,000 and I have a really good product. Okay. Does that make sense, guys? So what types of things, emotional or location, could we test for weight loss? Any ideas?
Like eating
I guess-
when bored.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bina.
Sorry, I don't do weight loss, but I'll probably say something like, how would you feel about not going into the cookie jar or something like that?
Yeah. How do you feel about that now? You told me before on the strategy call that you found yourself at 1 o'clock in the morning eating cookies from the cookie jar. Now that you're feeling X, Y, and Z, found the resource, how do you feel about that now? Imagine yourself going to the cookie jar. What's the difference? What are you noticing? Well, the more I think about it now, I'm starting to get a real sick feeling in my stomach. Beautiful. What you don't want is, wow, I feel really hungry. I can't wait to get home to that cookie jar. That's the wrong resource. Okay. So that's a good one. And that'll come up. Your client will give you that information. What else could we ask that would be a good testing for weight loss?
Do you think that when you're tired, that you will want to overeat just to feel better again, to get some energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's take a step back. I think you guys start to pick up on this. Every niche will pretty much have the same symptoms. Okay. That's why when I talk about in the testing masterclass, I use smoking, and that was, I think I had 11 or 12 or 13 circumstances that was so common for the lawyers. So I just use those same ones all the time. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to make a list and sort of just memorize, if you can, what are the common things that if Melanie is working with teenagers between the age of 20 and 25 who have social anxiety, what are the common things I know that sort of links them all together? They have it here, they experience it here, they always feel this. And you can just rely on those testing scenarios and the testing emotions. You can rely on those categories, the list, pretty much with every client, knowing they'll change a little bit, but they're the common ones. If you look at the list I gave you, the stop smoking ones, they were the common ones. And 95% of the time, as long as I pulled those out, everything was perfect. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. So let's look at this. Let's look at what are the common triggers for someone who overeats? When would the average human being overeat? Definitely tired would be one of them.
When they're bored.
Boredom's
Boredom?
a common one. Yep. What else?
Stress.
Stressed. Yeah, stress eating. What else?
Time of day, like nighttime.
Yeah, time of day, nighttime. Yep.
Loneliness.
Sadness.
Loneliness. Yep.
Disappointment.
Sorry, Nicole, what did you say?
Disappointment.
Disappointment. Yeah, so we've got 8 already. Let's keep going. Where else?
Feeling disconnected.
Disconnected.
From all kinds of things.
Grocery store. I know that's a stretch.
On their plate.
Go out a lot.
Yep. Yep.
Hungry.
Restaurant.
Yeah, restaurant. What about
Feeling
Friday
depressed.
afternoon? I'm just going to treat myself. You can't start a diet on Friday. I'll start it on Monday. I know that's a very common excuse. Who's used that before? I have. Okay, so I know it's a common human experience. Write these things down for your niche. Now, what's crazy is you have niche relevant, but you could also have industry relevant. Mine were very lawyer relevant, but they probably work for the normal human being who's not a lawyer. The symptoms are pretty much the same. But because I concentrated and tried to listen, what's common in lawyers, it made my testing so much more powerful because it's directly to them. Does that sort of make sense?